Hi everybody, welcome to the Evolution Center. I'm going to be working tonight. I'm going to be working with the energy tonight of the transition teams. This is going to be talking about all the things that the group has. Let me get rid of the music here. It's going to be talking about all the pieces that the group has been talking about having to do with transition teams and why they want to talk about transition teams. Why it is so important to them to discuss what transition teams are all about and what they are. So let me give you some of the basic ideas of what transition teams are all about and every other part of it. And that's what we're going to be working here with this fundamental series. This particular series tonight we're going to be working with is just all about the transition teams, and we hope to give you a good flavor of what the group says about these particular pieces. They're actually a very important part of our human attributes here on life. One of the pieces that we want to talk about here, because there are teams that the group talks about and why they call them teams, what that is about. But basically, this is all about helping people to transition through their experiences and to transition through their whole part about being pretending to be a human. Because we all know somewhere on a deep level that we're not. We all know somewhere that we are more than this physical body allows us to be. And we're trying to find our way. And most of the time, you know, we're basically trying to find our way home. And that's what it feels like. It feels so good to be able to do that and to actually make that connection. And at the same time, there's this tremendous amount of fear and lack of knowledge and everything else around the death process. It's kind of interesting because the group covers the transition teams, and we talk about both transitions, the transition of what we call birth and the transition of what we call death. So those two pieces are actually very huge, and I will show you why. We actually do a full overnight seminar. It's a 4-day experience on the entire transition team training, and it is meant for people that help people in that area. You know, a lot of people work in this area. A lot of people have become hospice nurses. Some of you have actually you never dreamed that you'd be doing that kind of work, and all of a sudden somebody came over to your house and they stayed until they died. Whatever the case, there's always these things that are going on that allows you to get involved with it. This is one area that every human on the planet should be looking at, and every human on the planet is going to experience at one point or another. So let's talk about some of the pieces here that the group talks about and why we go through this and what this is all about. So as you'll see here, we're working quite a bit with being able to run this energy and being able to use this energy. And the whole idea, of course, is to be able to kind of return home through this process and to be able to find that part of ourselves which we know is inside somewhere. Now, the transition teams themselves, there's 2 transitions in every life. So let's talk about that very quickly. They're the very simple ones of birth and death. So if you'll looks like I'm stuck on that one. Sorry, wrong computer. Here we go. We'll take a look at that. We have 2 transitions in every life, of course, and one of them is the birth process, and one of them is the death process. Now, here's an interesting point about this whole thing. In these 2 pieces, in these 2 areas here, as far as the soul is concerned, the scary one for the soul to do is the birth process. The scary one for the human to do is the death process. So keep in mind, they're exactly the opposite of each other, and the things that we're going to share with you about these teams that help people on both sides. For each human, you basically have 4 different teams. You have a team, let's go to the birth process first. So you basically have a team on that side that is preparing your soul, your essence, to come in and pretend to be a human, to play the game. And as we said, this is the most difficult one for a soul because you have to forget who you are. You have to forget your magnificence. You have to basically hide your powers. So as you do this, you can see that this looks quite a bit different and that the soul is actually very difficult to do. So what we do is we have teams on this side. Not only are there teams preparing, and we say teams for a reason, I'll get to that point in just a minute, but not only are there teams at home pushing the soul in and bringing the soul in, but there's also teams here to catch the soul. We call these catchers. We literally, they are sometimes the person who first helps the child out of the mother, or first holds the child, or first makes eye contact. Sometimes these are incredible contracts that happen very, very quickly and very, very powerful. Most of these are done by contract in a lot of ways. So when we talk about that, we'll kind of share with you how this works. But there are teams on both sides. So let's look at the different segments of the team so you can kind of understand what the group's talking about here and what we're trying to share with you. There are 3 segments to each team. And one of them, of course, is the person who works with the person who's transitioning. Whether that's a soul coming from the other side of the veil, being born into a physical body, or whether that is someone who's preparing to die, and you're actually helping them in some way. So that's actually somebody who works with that on that level. The second one, of course, is a person who works with the family. Now, this is huge, guys, because this is something the group has said that I have not heard before. But here's the biggest challenge. And we're also going to talk about this with grieving, because grieving is something that every single one of us should learn how to do. We should understand how that works in our lives, because we actually use it a lot of times throughout our lives, not just when somebody dies. And if we learned how, we know it's going to be a part of our lives. I don't understand, the group doesn't understand why we don't teach this in our schools. Because everybody is going to, every person on this planet is basically going to be thrown for a loop when this first hits them for the first time. And we don't have to be. A little bit of knowledge, a little bit of preparation, a little bit of understanding will go a very long way here. So that's the reason we have people that work with the family. Now, the biggest challenge here is if you have a soul that passes. Let's say a person's done, they've finished 86 years and they want to go home. They want to get one of those new crystal bodies for the next time out. And they're all done with their contracts. They're done with what they wanted to finish up here, and they want to go home. So literally sometimes they will start to leave, but the person's behind, the family who's left behind, if they cannot grieve and they cannot release the soul, if they're constantly thinking about them or spending every moment of their time thinking about this death and the person that left, it actually has the effect of holding the soul back on the other side of the veil. Here's a good way to think about it. If you have someone who's passed on, their energy is at home. They're not here. And they're fine. They're doing whatever they're doing. They're basically having fun. I mean, I hate to make it not real easy, because sometimes we don't honor real easy, but the reality is we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of that passion, a lot of that joy that we live in all the time. So literally that's what's happening. And yet every time, if I think, my mother passed years and years and years ago, yet if I see a picture on a television or something that reminds me of my mother, the moment my thoughts go to my mother, she is pulled from the other side of the veil and she's on my shoulder. Her energy basically is there looking at me. Now, she doesn't have to deal with time, so she can jump in the timeline anywhere she wants, because there is no time on the other side of the veil. But yet, the concept is very simple, because when I call her energy from this side of the veil, she's here. And if a person is not grieving, literally, they're constantly thinking about you, constantly pulling your energy, and it's very difficult for you to move forward and to go on to the next stages of the things that you want to do as a soul, into the next lifetimes and so forth, as long as someone here on planet Earth is still holding your grief, is still holding that energy and not letting go. So this is part of the reason we want to deal with this, and this is one of the more important pieces of the transition teams that we're working with. But there's more. Let's talk about the third part of the transition team. This is the person who actually works with the soul. This is the person that actually goes to the hospital, maybe the hospice worker who gets to know this person, but also can release their soul afterwards. These are sometimes the dream walkers that can walk you into death. These are sometimes the people that can work with the soul sometimes when they are earthbound. And I want to make that real clear about what the group says about this. Part of the fear, and we we get to see this fear all the time, especially when we do this seminar. This is really interesting because this 4-day seminar that we do on the transition teams, the overlight seminar of the transition teams, is probably the most loving. It's probably the place where you feel the most love in all of our seminars. And if any of you have been to our seminars before, you know the whole thing is about love. It's all about seeing that and feeling that energy and walking out with that. The transition teams probably have more of that than ever before. But the interesting part is it's the hardest one for us to market, because there is still a lot of fear about this whole death thing and transition and every other part of it. And even though we're talking about 2 transitions, this is one of the fears that all of humanity have. And bless you for watching this too, because this means that you're not afraid of it, or it's actually something absolutely incredibly beautiful. And if you look at it as both transitions being exactly the same, but in reverse, the soul is entering, the soul is exiting. It literally is, it explains why we are here and all the other parts of this. Okay, there's some important parts I want to leave you with tonight. I could talk all day with this with no problem, but there are some very important pieces that I want to kind of leave you with here, because we're trying to give you as much of this base information and make it available as we can, even without you taking any of our courses. So there's some important pieces I want to get to. This is not nearly all the information, of course, that's contained in the actual seminar. And in that particular seminar, just as kind of a plug for the seminar, I will tell you that Barbara does an exercise that is absolutely incredible in this seminar that allows you to actually feel what it is like to have to leave one world and enter the other. And it's just very powerful, and it's very beautiful. I think that's probably the most important part about this. Okay, let's go on to the next piece here so we can show you some of this. There's some really cool things I want to share with you about it. These are, and I know this is probably too small for you to read, but I just want to share with you that there are the team segments, the person who works directly with a person. In birth, that is called a catcher, or this is what the group calls them, a catcher. Basically, someone who's around the baby or the soul entering for just the first few days or even the first few hours, because literally you can greet that soul to earth. You can welcome them here and make them feel comfortable in a lot of different ways to get off to a good start. Okay, the second part, in the death process, this is the hospice worker, or possibly we call them release specialists, because many times they are there. Okay, when you come to the second part, the person who works with the family, this is the person who works in the birth process with the mother. This is sometimes the person who's the midwife, or the person who gives parenting classes or teaches new mothers how to handle their children. These are all areas here that these people work with to prepare the family and all the rest of the surrounding areas to prepare them for the entrance of the soul. And of course, the opposite of that on the death side, this would be the grief counseling. These would be people that help people process these things that have taken place. These are people that can help them see this and use this. And I will tell you that the group has a different view of grieving than most people. Grieving is typically about getting over a loss. The group says that's not true. The way they approach it is different. Instead of a loss, they are simply saying you are finding a part of that person to incorporate into you. So that is one of the beautiful things they said, and a lot of suggestions about how to physically do that, some good ideas about how you can help your clients as well as other people to go through this process. But it's a beautiful way that they look at it. Let's go on to the last piece here and the third process so we can talk about it. This is a person who works with the soul themselves. And this is like helping mom to learn to talk to her baby or learning to prepare. And this is also channeling the baby themselves and teaching mom how to do that and how to connect with that. And of course, on the death side of this, it is simply a mediumship or a soul or someone who works with the soul to walk them home. Now, let's talk very briefly about souls who do not go home, because you are on the planet of free choice and you don't have to go home. When is it that souls do not go home? And I think this is where a lot of our fear around death comes from, is because we've had a lot of this misunderstanding, and of course Hollywood and everybody else has played it into really, really spooky stuff, which we love, we eat it up. But basically what you're talking about here is that when a soul leaves, they have a choice. You have a choice whether the soul, once the soul steps out of the body and actually leaves the physical body, the soul has a choice. You're still on the planet of free choice. And if you are attached to a human emotion, let me repeat that, attached to a human emotion. And that can be any emotion. That can be love. It can be hate. It can be anger. It can be frustration. It can be any of those situations. If you are attached as a soul, you will not go home. You cannot go through the gate carrying those human emotions. So as long as you hold on to whatever it is, anger, frustration, you will be repeating in a cycle that we call ghosts. That is what we call a ghost. They're basically earthbounds. When I first started describing this, I started to here. Let's switch the camera so we can use some of the other areas here in the Evolution Center. But when I first started talking about some of this stuff, I used the word stuck, and I said, well, some of these souls are just stuck. And the group says, no, nobody's stuck. They said, you're on the planet of free choice. They are choosing not to release that human emotion. That's what is ultimately taking place. And of course, if it's anger, it can play out in an anger way. This is where we see poltergeists who play these funny kind of angry games. There was a movie with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore called Ghost, which was really all about, and the funny part about it is a lot of the things in that movie were real, according to the group, or at least accurately portrayed. One of the things about it was he personally was so attached to her that he couldn't go home. He loved her so much that he couldn't let go of her. And, of course, the whole movie plays out. And once he knows he's fine, he takes off and he goes home, and everything is perfectly fine. Well, that's similar in a lot of ways because of the fact that he was attached to a human emotion. Now, love is a universal constant. It's much more than a human emotion. But he was attached to his expression of that love and the way that it happened. He was not ready to leave his girl. And that's what caused him to stay in that particular situation. And, of course, many times we see people that learn to interact very similar to what they were talking about there. The other movie that we love to tell people about here, of course, is The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis. And right now we're on the death side of things because the death part of this fascinates us much more. When we have a birth, we have a celebration. We have balloons, we have parties, we have all the stuff around that. When we have a death, we have a mourning. It's quite a bit different situation, but it is also a celebration. Well, what you have to understand is the joy that you have around a birth celebration here on earth is the same joy that you have about returning home once you finally are received at home. There's some beautiful things coming about this. I personally am writing another book, a very short book with just a story. It's just a fiction story about a gentleman who wakes up one morning and he's dead and what he experiences. I haven't got the title for it yet, but it's coming along pretty quick, and we hope to get it out pretty soon because it illustrates exactly the types of things that people experience when they go home and when they release some of the physical bodies. And it really is a natural process. It's so incredibly ingrained. What the problems that we have are the human stuff that we try to take home. Judgments, ideas, concepts, and sometimes human emotions and attachment to human emotions. So it's not a problem, but when we learn ahead of time and when we're educated about some of the possibilities, then we start to understand a little bit more about life. And we also don't dread this part of our life, which is going to be a beautiful transition for each and every one of us when we finally do release this physical body of ours. So there's a lot here that we can talk about that we want to share with you. But there's a couple more points here that I want to bring up here on the line, and it's something, and they don't typically do this, but the group actually said it so perfectly over here that I want to read it right off the screen for you. And I know you're probably not going to be able to read this screen, so let me just read it for you here. They said a couple things. They said one of the things that is really beautiful here is they said, when you go to sleep at night, and with something troubling on your mind, it is law of energy that you must revisit that same energy upon awakening. In other words, if I have an argument with Barbara, I have something that goes on in my life that's really serious and really troubling me. Or let's say I have an argument with anybody, whatever the case. And all of a sudden I go to bed at night and I wake up the next day. Yes, I'm a little more refreshed. Yes, I'm clear. And I may stretch and go, oh, what a beautiful day. But the first conscious thought that comes back into my brain is exactly the same thought that happened before. Now, this is really important because it's exactly what happens in death. Let me go back to reading what the group says about it, and then we'll kind of come back to it here. But I want to share that one with you. Oh, I got my screens mixed up, don't I? Here we go. Okay, so second one. The transition you know is as death. In other words, the transition you know as death is similar in that if you leave troubled, scared, or confused, it is law of energy that upon reincarnating, you must revisit those same challenges. So a child who wakes up, have you, I've known kids that are angry, and their parents aren't angry. But I've known kids who have just had an anger problem or had a challenge in this part of the world or the other. I've seen people with a lot of those different challenges. And sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times this is where it's coming from. Let me finish here. There's several screens here that I want to read from them very quickly. This often determines the beginning state and first direction of each incarnation. The group called this life trajectory. In other words, this is the angle at which you leave. So, you die in a car accident. Let's say I die in a car accident tomorrow. And there I am stepping out of my body, and I'm looking at my brand new Mercedes that I had just worked all this time, and I finally got a Mercedes, and here it is crashing on me and killing me and all this other stuff. And I'm angry and I'm frustrated. Actually, there was a movie about that. It was by Albert Brooks. It was a beautiful movie. If you ever get the chance, absolutely hilarious. It was with Meryl Streep too. It was called. I'll think of the title in just a minute. Sorry, pulling a blank there, but it's called Defending Your Life by Albert Brooks. Hilarious movie. It's all about going in front of the judges after you die to see if you're going to go to the next level or not, and it's all based on how much fear you felt while you were in your body. Absolutely amazing. Really beautiful, really beautiful. Albert Brooks did an incredible job with it. He wrote it, directed it. Very, very interesting stuff. Older movie, but really, really wonderful with that stuff. But what happens here is that we die. We get angry, we get attached, and we go home. Now, when we come back in, we immediately pick up that anger. We immediately put back on that same emotional jacket that we had when we took our last breath. Now that we know this, we start to understand what we can do here with transition teams and how this kind of works with us. So let me bring the rest of it up here. It is often that a soul never recovers from that initial trajectory and gets stuck in an seemingly endless loop that overshadows that life from their point forward. We have all seen people who, no matter what they do, I can do something successfully, they will do exactly the same thing and it won't have the same effect. It won't work. And a lot of times this is because of soul trajectory. This is because of the path that you took in the very beginning having to do with how you left the last time. So these are the pieces that we really want to bring forward, because this makes this work incredibly important on planet Earth and hugely important to each and every one of us. Let's go back to what the group says about it so we can get that. Therefore, those who help in the transition process help raise the collective vibration of humanity more than any other modality. And they say transition team members are some of the greatest healers on earth. Yet you do not honor them, and you do not often even recognize them as healers. And you sort of understand why, because, after all, most of your patients do die, don't they? Okay. Well, the truth of the matter is we have an incredible piece here that we are going to be working with, and there is no reason why we cannot do this with dignity. There is no reason why we cannot do this with grace on both of our transitions and be able to use this energy very comfortably and very safely throughout our lives. You're going to find a lot of possibilities going on here. I'm going to switch over here to this other piece because I want to share one last piece here with you before we end this here tonight. The transition teams that we talk about are people that care about people. They're people trying to help. They are healers that specialize in a specialized area. And what we are trying to do here is to make people simply aware. We can tell you all kinds of fun little things that'll help you make sense. When we cover the 7 stages of life and you understand exactly why you contracted for this and what you had hoped to accomplish by doing this or by having this specific set of circumstances, these are the things that can help you feel more comfortable as a human here on planet Earth. And by understanding the 2 transitions of birth and death from the soul perspective, by understanding what that looks like to your higher self, that opens the door for you to have a comfortable, more steady life on this planet. By describing the 2 ends, you make sense of the middle path. It helps you to understand a little more of what you are doing here and why and how you got here. Dear ones, this is a very exciting time to be on planet Earth. We're all going to go through some challenges. We're all going to go through difficulties as we go from one stage to the next. But we also have some incredible opportunities here that none of us thought were going to be quite this exciting. Now, we hope that this has offered you an opportunity. If you're certainly interested in more, we do have a lot on this. Like I said, I will have a book out soon on this. There are other teachers who teach some incredible, beautiful stuff on this. And we do the Transition Team Seminar, which is part of our Overlight series, and which is a 4-day experience. Whatever it is, if you feel a draw in this area, hook yourself up with people of like mind. Try to bring yourself around other people, not just to validate you, but to make a safe space for this information to travel, to make a space for you to collect and to find this information to pass on to other people. Because we're here to help each other. We're here to try and make these transitions a little bit easier. Now, the difficult part is we are on the planet of free choice. There's no set, easy thing that's going to happen to every one of us. If you grow up all your life believing that the day that you die you're going to meet St. Peter at the gate, you will absolutely meet St. Peter at the gate. You are God, and every thought that you have manifests for you in some fashion. And all we're trying to do here is to give you a reflection of that so that you can see who you really are in the position that you have here on planet Earth. You're here playing a game. You're here pretending to be a human. And we really sincerely hope that you have a lot of fun with it and that you really enjoy this ride. And above all, celebrate those 2 transitions in life. And if you feel like you have done this before, many of you who are called into these seminars never have done this type of work and may never for a living decide to do this type of work. But many of you have actually been a part of the transition teams on the other side of the veil. And that's why you have a big pull for this. So whatever it is, know that you are carrying some very valuable information and valuable stuff for planet Earth. And these 2 transitions on planet Earth can be very helpful once we understand and celebrate them. That's all I have for you tonight. We hope to bring back more from the Evolution Center here in the Fundamental series. I personally enjoy this tremendously. Thank you for this opportunity to be of service in this way, and thank you for the opportunity to play this game and to be the channel for the group. Espavo, everybody. Good night.